Okay, you should get, I think you get a notification that
Yep.
will say that it's recording. So the time is 3:10 on Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021. I am doing an interview for the topic. Do online classes contribute to more global connections than traditional or face-to-face classes at a global university? For this interview, I offered face to face. I offered remote, but with our faces on. And I also offered to do the recording with our videos off. And my today's interviewer, Mr. Vernon Bach, chose a face to face over Zoom. And Vern, are you still good with doing it this way?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to meet today. Last evening, I did send you a copy of the Institutional Review Board agreement that explains how I will use the interview. Did you have a chance to review it? And do you have any questions from it?
I did review it, and no, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, please know as part of the interview, I'll be interviewing a variety of students who have taken both types of classes, a traditional face-to-face and an online, as well as professors who have taught in both capacities at global universities. So I appreciate you taking the time today, since you shared that you've been involved in both modalities throughout your career when you were advancing in your education. Please know that all respondents and interviews will be kept anonymous, and any names that you use would be redacted. So for the interview, my name is Danielle Yoder. Again, I shared the purpose of the interview is to gain just some information and background from you on your perceptions of the different types of learning, and kind of a little bit about your background through global universities. And once again, I'm interviewing Mr. Vern Bach. He is an assistant superintendent with a local school district who is pursuing his doctoral degree in educational leadership. And again, he's been involved in both traditional and online courses at, I believe, 2 different global universities throughout your career. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yesterday, I did send you some interview questions. I didn't know if you had a chance to review them or not.
I did not.
Okay. Well, please know if you want to pull them up, you can, but I do not plan to ask them in any order, and I may not ask all of them. I just wanted to have some. I'm going to use a semi-structured approach and just going to use them to guide me today.
Okay.
If you need anything clarified or repeated at any time, please just ask, and I'll try to restructure the question.
Sure.
Vern, when you start today, just kind of sharing your educational background and pathways that helped you to further your education, and within that, really kind of explain face to face and any online that as part of that.
Mhm. Yeah, I have an undergraduate degree, bachelor's degree of science and mathematics. Was very traditional face-to-face in-person instruction in a university in Washington, D.C. And then I have 2 master's degrees, Master's of Science in Educational Technology and Computer Science, and also a master's degree in Educational Administration, both of which were traditional in-person formats, and those were from an institution in Virginia. And then most recently, I am pursuing my doctorate in educational administration, and it's an educational doctorate. And I've had a mix of courses in this doctoral program, and a mix of fully synchronous, or I guess I should say in-person synchronous opportunities, as well as hybrid. So a mix of in-person and face-to-face. Also remote, remote synchronous, which is in person, but using a tool like Zoom or Google Meet. And then I've also had fully asynchronous courses through a World Campus option, which is totally asynchronous, work at your own pace, and typically connecting with peers through chats or posts, blog posts.
Um, so as a student in higher education, in any of the formats, what is normally what would you say is your purpose or what you hope to achieve or gain when you're taking any of the courses, any modality of those courses?
Sure. Obviously, first and foremost, I want to gain an understanding of the content, and not just an understanding, but a mastery level understanding of the content, so that I can apply that. And I'll speak specifically, most recently, to ed leadership. Obviously, I'm in a role as an assistant superintendent, so what I'm gaining from the courses, I'd be hopeful to apply real time in my current role and in my any subsequent roles, maybe as a superintendent, down the line. I want to make connections, to network. I think when you're pursuing a doctorate in an ed leadership program, you're going to meet folks from various leadership positions across many different districts, both in the state and out of the state, especially when pursuing at a global research institution and even internationally. And so I think that networking is helpful as an educational leader, to have, to learn about those experiences that might be different than your experience, whether it's a neighboring district, somewhere else in the state, or somewhere else in the country, or even internationally. And just having those networks of people to lean on and learn from, I think, is important. One thing I've noticed this year, or more, specifically, I think the hybrid lends itself a little more to this, is just this networking of folks that you might not have the opportunity to network with if you were in person. And so I want to have that networking opportunity, and I think that's important, to just increase your understanding, and also have those unique perspectives at the table and in the course that further your thinking, and change your thinking as well.
So you talk a lot about networking, and I appreciate hearing that. So think about the last traditional class you took that would have been fully in person, and with regards to networking, can you kind of describe a typical class within that global community and like how the networking went?
Yeah, I would say the in-persons have been, well, it's the dynamic has changed over my 25 years in the profession, and dating back to 1991 when I started my undergrad coursework. Heck, that was a long time ago, and so things have definitely evolved. Um, I think there's in the traditional setting, a lot of times there's a lecture that would occur with presentation of new information by the professor or the lecturer, and then there may be some breakout groups that are designed by the professor, and placing students into these particular groups to collaborate around a topic, and then maybe a presentation at the end, to kind of, and then the professor bringing it all back together and kind of a wrap up. I'll say that I feel like in the traditional face-to-face setting, there's much less networking, in my opinion, that occurs in the format that I just mentioned to you.
So, and you talked a lot of evolving, and I don't want to squeeze you in, but since with your doctorate, am I correct that you took both fully traditional face to face and fully asynchronous and the hybrid?
Correct.
So think about just since starting your doctoral, since those are probably more up to date than your past when it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And really, you started to share a little bit about the lack of networking. So go ahead and talk to me about a typical day in either a hybrid or and online. So I'll let you decide how you want to talk about it. But on an online class,
Yeah.
describe that typical day, some of the things that you've gone through, and then go ahead and go on to maybe compare and contrast the two for me,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
traditional and online.
Yeah, I think it's important. I will have to make a distinction here between three formats. I think obviously there's in person, there's hybrid, and then there's asynchronous. And so for me, I think the hybrid lends itself to much more um, of those global connections, the networking, because it is face to face, it's real time. There's the ability for the professor to to assign groups of students that otherwise might not be placed together. You know, in a current course that I'm taking right now, I'm in classes with a student from Uganda. There's a student from China. There's students from all over the state in the country who are bringing all those unique experiences and perspectives to the table to make the conversation much richer. You know, I have enjoyed my asynchronous courses, but I don't think the asynchronous course has, at least in the structures that I've been in, have lended themselves more to that level of networking. The asynchronous courses I've been in, there's been some group work assigned, but it's not to the extent of the hybrid. And I also think too, a hybrid class could have a lot less networking. It really comes down to how that class is structured. And I think just because of the way the asynchronous courses I've had have been structured with less of that, doesn't mean that it can't happen. I think if the instructor was intentional in their design and that was a priority for the instructor or the professor, they could design the asynchronous opportunities so that people were blogging or video chatting in that same type and reaching that same type of group. But I just haven't had that experience yet. So my experiences of around hybrid have been much richer in the networking piece.
So with online, whether it be the hybrid or the asynchronous, because you bring up very good points regarding the hybrid being an opportunity to see and talk a little bit more with networking. How do you believe online learning impacts a university community?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I've put a ton of thought into that. I think what I would say is obviously um, you can reach out further. That network can become much broader. It can become much more international. It can afford opportunities to people that might not have the opportunity otherwise, that couldn't drive to the university, don't live within proximity to the university. So it definitely increases accessibility for folks who might not otherwise have the opportunity. And that accessibility goes both ways, because if you live near the university, now you have access to these people from all over the place. And I just think it makes it a much richer experience. I think it allows the university to expand its footprint and impact many, many more people than it would otherwise.
How about the disadvantages for a university?
Yeah, if you would have asked me that before I'd had the opportunity to have hybrid, I think I was coming into hybrid classes with a preconceived notion that it wouldn't be engaging, um, and I really genuinely thought that was the case because I never had the experience. All of my classes were traditional, and I thought that was always the most beneficial format, to be in a class, in a seat, listening to the professor, and potentially interacting live with a peer who's sitting right next to you. I've actually it's changed my opinion, uh, and I think for me it's been a rich environment. It allows to a disadvantage might be, for some people they really do crave that face to face live interaction. And I think for a person who really needs that, this would be a disadvantage, the hybrid. I've not found that to be the case, because for me, it does meet my needs. So that might be a disadvantage. Um, so yeah.
So I'm hearing from what you're saying that talking more of a hybrid, so online but connected. But talk to me with the different modalities, and you can consider all three since we've kind of broken it into three today. What about depth of learning? Share your thoughts regarding if you believe one provides a deeper learning experience than the others, and why. Why do you think that is, and what maybe is it?
Yeah, I think again, prior to having hybrid, I would have said an in-person would have provided more depth. Now I think due to the nature of my study, um, I'm not, I don't need to have a field experience or a lab experience. I think that could be a huge detriment to. I think in those cases, an in-person may be more beneficial and may be an advantage um, with depth. But I actually think because the hybrid allows this broader reach and bringing in more perspectives, and the way the courses that I've had have been structured have been a lot of dialogue and discussion that includes people from all over the world. I think it's made it a deeper, richer experience as a result.
So, with regards to the content that you're trying to take away, so you're in educational leadership, trying to learn everything you can, even with the networking and the variety, because I'm sure it's different with global connections. Give me your thoughts on learning content. So maybe not depth of learning, but the different content that a course is going to teach. Do you feel differences, the value, anything between the two?
I think a central theme to any good instruction is kind of a format of I do, you do, we do. And um, I think all three formats that we're discussing today can be very positive if the instruction is designed around those tenets, right? That there's a true focus on collaboration, on giving somebody the opportunity to wrestle with the content, to internalize it, and then to discuss with others to further internalize it and reshape it, I think is important. So I think that tenet is necessary for good instruction in all formats. And I think it would be lousy. I think hybrid could be lousy if the professor's just standing there, um, lecturing for 45 to 50 minutes. So I think it's got to follow this format where it's giving people the opportunity. We're gonna present some new information in a snippet. I'm gonna let you grapple with it, collaborate with your peers around it, and then we're going to come back together and report out. And really, I think the students drive the learning. I see the professors in this format, and in a K-12 setting, I would see the same thing as the teacher being the guide on the side, and not this. I hate to be cliche, but not this sage on the stage just talking for an hour and a half. I think if that format is followed, um, and the students really drive the learning and take ownership of the learning, I think is most beneficial.
So you brought up professors and you talked a little bit about this, but just to go a little bit deeper for me, what about the professor's approaches in the two different environments? So in your recent coursework,
Mhm.
are you seeing different approaches? Does one benefit better? Can it be done just as good in one? Anything you can talk to me about their approaches?
Yeah, I have seen different approaches in the different formats. Um, I think those folks who in an in-person format lecture the whole time and make it more about them and less about the students, I think is obviously less beneficial, uh, because I don't think learning is internalized. I go back to that I do, you do, we do. I think if the professors are taking that approach in the in-person and the remote, I think is most beneficial. And even, I've been in asynchronous classes where that's been the format. And so honestly, surprisingly, I've had some asynchronous formats that I feel I've learned more in those courses than I have in in-person courses, just because of the way they were structured, and this deliberate pedagogical structure of gradual release, and then having the student interact, and then demonstrating what they've learned, and then iterations and reiterating back onto that to take the learning even further. And so, I had a school finance class. I believe that Money in Schools maybe is what it was called, I learned a huge amount from, and it was totally asynchronous. So I think the if designed the appropriate way and using some of the approaches that I just mentioned, all three of the formats can be huge. But it really does come down to the professor, in my opinion.
So prior to COVID, I um, I don't know if hybrid was thought as much about. Something I'm trying to figure out, because when I originally worked on this, I was thinking, online, what, not considering the approaches. Do you think that since COVID and since the sudden shift, that universities will need to consider the different types? If so, why? What value would it be to start really considering all approaches, since they had to do it in a pandemic situation?
Yeah, I think ideally, yes. So the answer to that question is, I think K-16 is going to be thinking differently about the way things uh, are done, have been done, will be done in the future. I think we've learned a tremendous amount. I think college professors have learned a tremendous amount. Um, I see aspects of each of these playing a role in the college experience. Um, I see opening up a world to students where this would not have been accessible otherwise, and allowing universities to broaden their footprint. I think there's a lot of professional development that still has to be done with folks delivering in these multiple modalities. And really capitalizing on what we think works in each modality. I think there could be a course that has all three, right? That meets, quarterly in person, but has some hybrid opportunities, but also some asynchronous opportunities. I see the ideal course actually a blend of all three. Um, but obviously there has to be some professional learning that has to occur and continue to occur, and will evolve. And I think these formats, I think the pandemic was terrible to go through. I don't think any of us want to go through it again. But I think what we've learned and lessons learned, and how we can leverage technology in K-16 moving forward, will change the face of education. And I think it's going to change it for the better.
So, what do you believe global universities should consider as they move forward with learning modalities and offerings in all environments, and why?
Yeah, I definitely think professional development. Obviously, I'll touch on that again. I think it's going to be huge to really provide professors with the necessary tools, so that they can make the hybrid and asynchronous opportunities the most beneficial for students. I think also providing training for students. I mean, when you're a student in a hybrid class or an asynchronous class, there are things that you have to think about differently, and training and providing some in-service or some training to students on how to be successful in a hybrid class or an asynchronous class. Time management's huge when you're in an asynchronous learning environment, and you know there's no time to show up for class, but you have to complete this work and submit a product by Sunday. You have to pace yourself out. That takes some time to learn, takes some time to get used to. Um, Blog etiquette and online etiquette. What is aesthetic online and what isn't. It's much easier to um, maybe be a little more direct than you normally online format than a face-to-face format. How do you online and you're hurting somebody's feelings? So
Sure.
there's
Can you, I apologize for interrupting. Can you go back just about 1 minute? You were freezing and so I'd like to make
Yeah.
sure I capture that.
Yeah. I where I lost you. You hanging up again, Danielle?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's on your end or my end. Now you're
You're
coming
you're
across.
coming through fine.
Yeah, you're choppy. It's o it's okay.
Would-
Um,
would- Go figure. No, so how about now?
yeah, you're sounding a little better now.
Okay. Now's okay?
Yes.
Can you tell me where I got choppy?
Yeah, just with moving forward, you're talking about the professional development and
Yeah.
really changes that they would have to do. So if you could just repeat that part, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, I think making sure to spend time on developing people around what are the norms for online learning, establishment of norms, how do you honor those norms? How do you interact with people so that you're not hurting people's feelings? How can you be direct without offending someone in an online format? Um, you know, and another a case in point too is something that has to be considered with online formats is infrastructure, right? Technology infrastructure. We just had an issue in the interview where things got choppy, and so those things are going to arise from time to time, and technology can be unpredictable. And if there's a crash or there's a thunderstorm or a lightning storm outside and people's power goes down, that those are things that impact service delivery models. So, I think some time's going to need to be spent too on developing professors around, how to best reach, what are the best strategies for online learning, and they may not be the same and the best strategies that you would use in person. So really just being deliberate and taking time to develop this further. And I do think this is going to really transform education, and we're going to be better as a result of what we've learned.
Okay, just a few more questions. So you are a student working on an advanced degree and also working full time. What ramifications do you believe exist by using only traditional learning styles when you're working full time and trying to obtain this degree?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned accessibility earlier. This would be really hard for me to earn a degree if it was alter. Now, I'm really close to a global research university. I can get there in 5 minutes. So for me, accessibility might be a little bit easier than for most. But as a dad, pursuing a career full time, I have 3 kids, trying to balance, attending their activities and trying to balance all that in the personal life and the work life and getting this degree. It'd be really hard to do if everything was traditionally, sitting in a class for 3 hours and, a couple times a week. This definitely cuts down on travel time. I can run home, have a quick meal with the kids and the family before popping into a Zoom right from the comfort of home. I can put my headphones in and iron my shirts for work, which I was doing last night in a class while I had the computer next to me and I was listening in. I was ironing some dress shirts and throwing some clothes in the laundry. And so, I think it allows you to multitask. And I'm not taking anything less from the courses. I'm still plugged into them, but it just affords a lot more flexibility and to be with family and to pursue those things that you need to pursue while also earning a degree.
So I guess I didn't um, ask your choice. So in the future, you're working on your doctorate. If the university came out and said we are offering all, you get your choice on whichever style, would you pick one over the other, and why?
My choice would be hybrid, and a mix of asynchronous. I'd be fine with that too. And again, I shared earlier, if you'd asked me that before starting this program, I would have said totally in person. Uh, but my lens has changed, and I also think too there was a negative connotation with online classes, like you're getting a degree from a Cracker Jack box or something, and it was something less than. And I've actually viewed the experience. So I, I, my vote would be for hybrid and asynchronous.
Okay. Anything else for me to consider as any other views or philosophies before we close the interview?
No, it's definitely, I would add that it's definitely changed my perspective and my lens. not only as a student, but as a professional, having, serving in the role as an assistant superintendent in a pretty large district, going through the pandemic and trying to manage the hybrid experience, and in-person experience. My lens has definitely changed for the better, and I think um, we'll be better as a result. So yeah, that's it. That's all I have.
All right. Well, that is all I have today, too. I want to thank you for taking the time to answer those questions and working with me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. If I have
Yep.
any follow-up questions, is it okay to email you?
Sure, absolutely.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this point.
Thank you.